The Philippines is under pressure, navigating tense disputes in the South China Sea, also known as the West Philippine Sea, managing its alliance with the United States, and responding to political protests at home. To understand how Manila is approaching these challenges, I'm joined by the country's Foreign Secretary, Secretary Tess Lazaro. Thank you so much for joining me, Secretary Lazaro. So you might be here in the U.S. on official business, but I would like to start with events closer to home. We've seen this wave of demonstrations in Southeast Asia, including the Philippines. What do you think this reveals about the kind of governance that citizens expect now from their leaders in the region?
Well, that's a very timely question in the sense that indeed there is some kind of resonance among the youth, among the Gen Z as they call it. Yes, I think it's all about governance. Well, I can only speak about the Philippine case. This is something that probably has been talked about, the issue of corruption in public works and infrastructure. But the president, during the last State of the Nation address, brought it up. And now it seems that there will be a procedure that is being discussed, or rather being tackled now, whereby there will be definitely some cleansing process that will be made. And yes, this for us, for the Filipinos, this is indeed democracy in action. And it will be good if things can be rectified. That's what has happened before, because so much funds were really dispensed off in not the proper way that it should be. Philippines is, of course, made up of very young people. We need this very important funds for education, for healthcare, and I think the young people, and not only, it's across the board. Even the people on their, the senior people are very much in the thick of things. It is really a sentiment that's very dear to the Filipinos.
And how do you think, ma'am, the Filipinos can be sure that something will change, that this cleansing effort will have an impact?
Well, the president has been very, very, how do you say this? He took his action fast. He appointed, number one, he appointed a minister, a secretary of the Department of Public Works, who has been an action man before, because before that he was in another department. Secondly, he already established a commission to really investigate, made up of people of very good character. The Department of Justice is moving now. In fact, across the board, there are already requests for no, they should not be leaving the country. It's really a process for us, and this is really serious action. And I think, hopefully, we will see the results of these actions.
Just because it has to be addressed, of course, President Marcos's own family has also been embroiled in their own corruption issues. Can the Filipino people consider him a reliable steward of this process to weed out corruption?
Yes, I think the president is a reliable steward. In the first place, who brought this out? It was the president himself on the State of the Nation address. And he knows that it is about time to take action on this situation. There's so much funds needed for so many activities of the government, and we have to put this money and not into corruption, but into the right places. As I said, education, healthcare, and many other aspects of governance.
You're the Foreign Secretary. Are you in any way concerned about what these corruption revelations have done to the image of the Philippines abroad?
Yes, we're very conscious about this. I had 35 bilaterals, and not one of them asked me about the situation in the Philippines. I think they are of their minds that they're very sure that the Philippines is solid in its governmental machinery, in its governance. So they cannot see us in a situation like the other countries in the region. I am of the view that it will not escalate any further, because actions have been undertaken, and real actions. It is not something like a band-aid solutions, no? In fact, the fact that prosecution, our prosecutorial offices, agencies have already starting to do its part.
And what sort of concrete measures of success will the Filipino people be able to watch out for? How will they know that it's worked?
I think offhand, conviction. A conviction of several people that we are already aware, as stated in the papers, and based on the investigation of both the House and the Senate, perhaps it's a real indication that things will be, that this conviction will rectify whatever has happened wrong in the past.
Now, I would like to move on to the U.S.-Philippine relationship. We're just a few months on from a high-stakes meeting between Presidents Marcos and Trump. Since that meeting, how has the needle been moved in U.S.-Philippine ties?
I think the needle has always been moving forward in that sense. It's moving in the sense that this situation of the tariff is still continuously being discussed. Yes, there was a reaction towards that tariff, but it just decreased by a certain percentage. But our trade people are still continuously discussing. I know that there is no longer the U.S. aid, but as a result of that meeting in Washington, D.C., there was even a certain amount, just can't recall the numbers, but this is for part of it is before the Luzon Economic Corridor, which is an important project actually of the trilateral cooperation, United States, Japan, and the Philippines. And then there was now a very recent document also that we have signed and sort of discussed with the State Department is on healthcare and many others. It's about a certain amount of almost $250 million. So this, we think, is the continuous discussion towards between the Philippines and the United States. Our people in defense, our Department of Defense continuously talks to the DOD in Washington, D.C. and many aspects. Just now, I had a meeting, or rather, we convened a meeting in the sidelines of the UNGA on maritime cooperation, and Secretary Rubio was present in that meeting. So it's a continuous discussion and collaboration with the United States.
Now, you also mentioned the Defense Alliance. Now, we've seen several occasions now where both sides have reaffirmed their ironclad commitment to the Mutual Defense Treaty. But is it now any clearer what sort of scenario would actually trigger the treaty's obligations on either side?
I think it's very clear that the Mutual Defense Treaty will only be triggered if one party invokes it. And if you recall the statement of President Marcos in the Shangri-La Dialogue, he said that one of our red lines is if a Filipino becomes a casualty or as a result of some kind of skirmish. So this, I think, is one of the possible scenarios whereby the MDT can invoke. But we are very, I think both sides rather, are very careful in having this situation happen.
It does feel, again, like one of those situations where nobody wants it to come to that, but the possibility that it can is not zero. There could very well be a death that could trigger the Mutual Defense Treaty.
For Philippines and China, we continuously have these challenges. However, we have a bilateral mechanism. We call it the BCM, the Bilateral Consultative Mechanism on the South China Sea. We have been meeting, and when I was Undersecretary, I was heading this delegation, and all the issues which are pertaining to the South China Sea are being discussed. All agencies the agencies concerned are also involved.
I had another question about, related, of course, to the defense ties, about EDCA, the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. How is the Philippines thinking about how U.S. EDCA sites would be used in the event of an armed U.S.-China conflict? Of course, assuming that perhaps China invades Taiwan and the U.S. gets involved. Is the use of these EDCA sites really limited to logistics and defense, or could their use evolve depending on the circumstances?
Well, I will just be responding to you as far as I know. And really, I've been talking to the other agencies concerned, like, for example, the Department of Social Welfare and Development. They have been focusing on the EDCA sites to fill it up with packaged meals every time we have these natural calamities. So as far as our discussions are concerned, we are limited to that. Perhaps it is within really the purview of our Department of National Defense on where it will evolve. But as far as we are concerned, this is it's really for HADR purposes.
For humanitarian purposes.
Humanitarian purposes.
If we could stay on Taiwan.
Yes.
So,
okay.
is interaction with Taiwan changing given the need for contingency planning, also because of all the Filipino nationals that are there?
The Philippines adheres to the One China policy. However, there are certain aspects, particularly in the economic aspect, whereby there is a collaboration, there is an interaction between the Philippines and Taiwan. But with regards to your question, I see more of the increased interaction because of trade and investments. Now, as far as the possibilities of the future, we in the Philippines is very much focused on the contingency plan. Of course, this is an interaction concerning Taiwan, but we're very concerned about almost 200,000 Filipinos there, and therefore the contingency plan is focused on that, on how to protect our nationals.
So how do you approach that? How do you approach this balance of adhering to the One China policy, as well as having to interact more because of having to protect the Filipino nationals there, and as well as the shared challenges that the Philippines has with Taiwan because of Chinese assertiveness? How do you balance all those things?
In many aspects, like what we have been doing in the past, agencies, before they interact with Taiwan, has to go through us, and they seek our some kind. It's not really a permission, but for us to know where they are going. So the focus is to trade and investments, and this protection of our Filipino nationals is foremost. But as I said, there is always a clear how do you say this? Very clear coordination with the Taiwanese authorities, and I think this does not violate the One China policy, because Filipinos, almost 200,000, and there are other nationals there. In fact, we're small compared to the other ASEAN nationals.
At one point, Manila did announce that it was relaxing its rules on official visits to Taiwan. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that was decided, what the rationale for that was?
It may be that it is not a very precise description of the situation. Everything boils back to the very basis, which is the joint communique in 1975. And it has still been, until now, that the President, Vice President, Secretary of Foreign Affairs, and Secretary of National Defense should not step in Taiwan, in official and in official capacity. So the only situation that has changed a little is because we are giving really a lot of emphasis now on trade and investments. So that's where it is. It's basically the same. And again, it does not violate the One China policy, because even in let's go back to the composition of APEC. Taiwan is part of APEC because it is not a country, it is an economy. So, and that's how we still see Taiwan.
Going now to the issue of the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea. So recently, President Marcos made some remarks decrying the lack of progress made on issues surrounding the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea. How would you characterize the situation now in the South China Sea in terms of progress or lack of progress?
First of all, the Philippines, in pursuing the issues of the South China Sea, is always a principled stand and peaceful, as well as handling it from a diplomatic point of view, diplomatic sense, despite the challenges. Because as I mentioned, that mechanism of these, the BCM, it may not be perfect, but the two foreign ministries speak together with the other concerned government agencies. Clear discussions are still being pursued, and we still go back to what the President said, that any dispute should be addressed in dialogue and in diplomacy.
I just want to go to one incident in early August where a Chinese Navy ship accidentally rammed a Chinese Coast Guard vessel that was pursuing a Philippine patrol in disputed waters. The incident escalated when the U.S. sent 2 warships to support the Philippines, and Beijing then responded with its own warships and a fighter jet to push them out. You've mentioned the importance of keeping this dialogue open, but what else can the Philippines do to keep this from sparking into a wider crisis?
We have a group of like-minded countries which have supported our statements, our various statements, and even the past incidents. There's always, of course, countries in the EU, and of course the United States is in the forefront of the support. That is a very important part of it. The support, the statements of support of the different, and we call it like-minded countries. I just like to reiterate what I said about convening issues on maritime cooperation, which was just convened, I think, last Wednesday. And we did had a lot of support from almost 40 countries, 21 of which are foreign ministers. So that, I think, is very important. And then we also have some kind of, how do you say this, minilaterals. I mean, talking about, of course, that of the trilateral dialogue of among us, the Philippines, United States, and Japan. In fact, we just met in Kuala Lumpur among the 3 foreign ministers, and there was a lot of focus on the Luzon Economic Corridor, which I mentioned, and I've been mentioning this to my colleagues, the other foreign ministers, that if you want the Philippines to be security strong, you have to help us to economically strong. That is now, and therefore there's a lot of support in terms of trade and investments.
So the Philippines is strengthening its economic partnerships in order to be in a better defensive position.
Basically that.
You, of course, were also instrumental in securing this provisional arrangement with China for the Second Thomas Shoal. How can you assess how well this arrangement with China is holding, and what options does Manila have if it does not look like it is?
During the implementation of the provisional arrangement between the Philippines and China, it started in June 17 last year, where one of the soldiers had the finger injury. Since then, when we concluded this arrangement, it's more than a year now. There had been 10 RORES, rotations and reprovisioning of necessities, and there were never had any incidents. I think there is respect between the 2 countries, and of course, it's not that we ask permission from them when we want to provide the necessities as well as rotation. I think it's just that because we adhere and we implement this provisional arrangement. So far, it has been successful. We have already conducted 10, the latest of which was in the first week of September. It's just that we deemed it proper not to be giving information before and during and after every event, or rather RORE. We are not giving information to media because it's really it's really the work of security agencies. It's not something that you should be talking about. But I can assure you that our people in the Sierra Madre have been rotated because they've been there for about a month or two. I'm not very sure about their rotation, and they are provided with the necessary necessities as because brought about by the ships that give them their provisioning, their necessities.
It's been more than a year since an emergency telephone hotline was set up between the presidential offices of Beijing and Manila. Now, and that of course was established to prevent escalations in the South China Sea. Has it been used? Has it been used in recent clashes? Did China pick up? Because there were also reports of other low-level hotlines that were similar, where sometimes China would not pick up.
To be precise, that your earlier statement that the establishment of hotlines, no, it has not been agreed upon, and therefore it has not been implemented. But because there is a certain agreement on certain levels, so far it's working.
They are picking up.
They're picking up. They're picking up.
At which level are they picking up?
This is in the level of the foreign ministry.
At the foreign
both
ministry.
Foreign ministries.
But what about this presidential hotline?
It is still being discussed. Hopefully, if we have supposed to be another bilateral mechanism before the end of the year, then we can sort of finalize these agreements.
Is that something that's wanted from both sides?
It is something that we are discussing. It is not that one is denying or declining it. No one is declining that possibility.
We may see the hotline or not.
We may or may not see it, but at least the discussion is there, and as I said, it's not being declined.
My next question, where such a hotline might be useful, is of course on the Scarborough Shoal and how China has been building up a nature reserve. Now, Beijing has of course built up features on contested areas before, but Scarborough Shoal, as we know, is particularly close to Philippine shores. Are you concerned that nature reserve could potentially provide cover for building more infrastructure? And would that be a red line for Manila?
Whatever the intention of the Chinese, we immediately protested towards that, simply because that area is an integral part of the Philippine territory. So we will never accept such, and this is very important to us. So whatever their intentions are, we have immediately sent a protest note the day after they announce it.
Will there be any kind of consequences for China if they ignore the protest note, or if they, for example, start building infrastructure on the Scarborough Shoal, if they go beyond this nature reserve announcement?
We will always look at this not in a good sense, because this is in violation of the territory of the Philippines.
Staying with China, it's completed a third draft of the Code of Conduct with ASEAN for the South China Sea. That is, of course, meant to guide behavior in these disputed waters, and the aim is to finalize it by 2026. But the real test, of course, is going to be whether it would actually restrain China. So from your perspective, what would make this code credible, and what happens, again, if China does not follow?
Let me just answer you by stating the status. They had a series of meetings this year, of course, with a view to finish this Code of Conduct by 2026, as mandated by the foreign ministers. However, it's, I think, really becoming, I mean, as time progresses, there are a lot of issues that have been coming out. Singapore just had a meeting, I think, early this month, and there will be another meeting by Beijing. It will be held in Beijing. Intersessionally, there had been discussions on certain definitions of terms, but as as you have said, there's still a lot of difficulties. So we still have until July of 2026, which is part of our chairship, to look into the possibility of having this, realizing this code of conduct. We're not giving up. We still have, we're talking to, of course, our ASEAN colleagues as well as, of course, China. So it's still a work in progress.
A work in progress. Would you be willing to describe some of the difficulties, a particular sticking point perhaps, and where it currently stands?
One of them is whether it's legally binding or not. The Philippines is of the view that it should be legally binding, but other countries are not into that mode, or they want to see the whole package first before it is legally, whether it's legally binding or not. Now the recent discussions is the scope. That is something really that has to be, it cannot be done in a way in one or two discussions. So perhaps more discussions is being anticipated. But yeah, that's the other one, the scope, whether it's legally binding, many definition of terms that has to be defined.
You said it's a work in progress. You do sound a little bit like you're tempering expectations. How high are your hopes that this will become a reality in 2026?
I always think that hope springs eternal, and therefore it's our chairship already next year. It's very important for us to have this code of conduct. So that's why I'm a little bit anticipating success. But at the same time, one has to be very realistic and pragmatic of the situation. But we'll see.
Since you brought up the chairmanship of ASEAN, so the Philippines is assuming the chairmanship of ASEAN in 2026. So the bloc, of course, hasn't always spoken with one voice when it comes to issues of the South China Sea. How will you use ASEAN's chairmanship to foster unity within the bloc while still standing firm on Manila's own claims?
The issue between the dispute between the Philippines and China is bilateral in nature, and it will remain bilateral. So in terms of the ASEAN, in the ASEAN context, there will always be the ASEAN concept of as we are dealing with many of our dialogue countries, and that's how we are going to work on this. We want a successful ASEAN, and China is a very important dialogue partner. So we will pursue what has been pursued in the past by the previous chairs, and will continue to do so, and probably many other issues that will maybe come up that needs a resolution.
I guess the Philippines is not the only country that is grappling with sovereignty issues, with issues of China's assertiveness. So how will the Philippine chairmanship sort of bring those discussions together? The response from each country has not always been of the same philosophy.
ASEAN has been diverse in its positions and its affiliations, but I guess we always find reasons and means for consensus making. And this is practically what guides ASEAN, is consensus.
How much room is there for other issues on the table, like Myanmar? Will the Philippines use its chairmanship to push enforcement of the 5-point consensus, this plan to end violence and put pressure on the junta in Myanmar?
The 5-point consensus is probably the basic tenet of ASEAN, because this is the leaders themselves who came up with it. However, as time progresses, we are of the view as the next chair that we will be working on what has been done by the chairs before us. Malaysia has done so much, was able to gather the stakeholders. In fact, I understand that the Malaysian foreign minister will be visiting Naypyidaw in the coming days. So these are very important steps, and we don't want to do what has been done. We will continue to build on what has been done. Just that time is also of the essence, and we have to continue and discuss things over with the people of the military junta in Myanmar.
Are you optimistic that the situation in Myanmar will improve?
I always said that hope springs eternal. This is the second time I'm saying this, but we totally believe in dialogue and diplomacy, and we just have to do our best. I have no notion of what will come, but there's been a series of chairships from the other since ASEAN. I mean, to handle this 5-point consensus. So we'll try to do the same. I don't expect really something that will be revolutionizing the situation, but little steps, incremental steps will always help.
Getting it enforced, perhaps.
Well, getting it enforced. Of course, the enforcement is not only with ASEAN, it's global. The UN is very concerned too, and the many other countries out there is very much focused on Myanmar. It's just that we still believe in the view that the changes in Myanmar should always be Myanmar-owned and Myanmar-led, and not in many other manner.
We started with the situation in the Philippines. We talked about U.S.-Philippines ties. And now I would like to ask you about Filipinos in the U.S. So the United States, of course, has intensified its crackdown on immigration. Many Filipino nationals have gotten caught up in this crackdown. So what concrete steps is the Philippines taking to protect Filipinos who are swept up in this, especially those who say they are swept up in it unfairly?
Just going to the basic issues, let's talk about the H-1B visas.
The visa for qualified personnel.
Yes, this is actually a visa that whereby many Filipinos have been issued into, and I think this is something because the skills or the knowledge of the Filipinos is very important to the United States. Our Philippine Embassy in Washington has been coordinating with the State Department because it was a sweeping statement. So we are requesting for more clarification, and for those cases whereby some have already been detained, our embassy and we have several consulates here in the United States are really focusing and assisting our Filipinos who have been perhaps detained. But it's important to us that these Filipinos, assuming that they have committed certain violations, will not be sent to a third country, instead to go back to where they came from the Philippines. But our embassy is very much on top of it and has been working closely with the concerned U.S. government agencies.
And they're confident that they will be able to prevent Philippines from being sent somewhere else like El Salvador or...
Based on our my discussions with our embassy in Washington, not only that they're quite confident because of it's not only being confident, but because this is the result of continuous discussions.
I do want to highlight one specific case involving Filipino seafarers. They've also been caught up in these deportation efforts. So on the Carnival Sunshine, at least 21 were arrested, deported by U.S. authorities. Crew rights groups have called the removals unjust and humane and said they were treated like criminals without clear evidence. How is the Philippine government addressing this, also in light of how important seafarers are to the Philippine economy and global shipping?
In fact, this case is being handled by our Department of Migrant Workers, who's really in charge of these issues of overseas Filipino workers, particularly seafarers. And our embassy in Washington has also been very much involved in continuing the discussions, and as well as giving them the protection as well as the grievance machinery that they've been looking for.
Can I just ask one last one? Whether you have any last remarks on the state of Philippine foreign policy or the Philippines' place in the world?
I guess the president has enunciated that the Philippines will always be friends to all and enemy to none. It may be a cliche, but we are serious about that. We continuously, as I said, have these discussions. And it's very important to us to strengthen and expand our relations. The 35 bilaterals that I mentioned are really, a lot of this is in Africa and Latin America. Not for anything else, it's because we wanted to strengthen the relations and we want to share our technical cooperation, whatever we have. Like, we're very good in migration management. So these are the things that we think we can, to strengthen South-South cooperation. It's basically that. And of course, the relations, trade, investments, these are very important to us. And we continuously work on this. In fact, in the Department of Foreign Affairs, we're strengthening our economic diplomacy office, because we think that this is one of the important elements in the relations with so many countries.
Thank you very much for your time, Secretary Lazaro.
Thank you. You're welcome.